Hey there, thanks for clicking in. I hope you enjoy my video write-up about my BMW E30 Turbo Conversion. So the first exciting part of the job, after eyeballing all my parts on the floor in the workshop, was the strip down. I needed to basically strip most of the things out of the engine bay, as well as all of the front end. I stripped with the knowledge that certain things weren't going back because they were going to be replaced with modified parts. I stripped with the knowledge that some things were going to be cleaned or renewed, refreshed, repainted and put back on the vehicle. I stripped certain things that were completely rotten and would need to be replaced, so I was happy that I'd be able to get on the phone early in the job, order these parts so that they'd be here in good time. Now it was time to drain all of the fluids which would be replaced in the job and take down the timing components which would also be replaced in the job. Then I had access to the cylinder head. With the cylinder head removed, I sent it off to the engineers to replace all the valve stem seals, valves and rocker arms. In the meantime, I thought I'd remove the pistons, re-hone the cylinders, replace the pistons and piston rings, and change out both the big end and main bearings. With all the engine refreshed and renewed and all the components ready to go, it was time to get down to modifying. I had drawn everything up on computer, and here it is for you to refer to. All the components were laid out, except with the best laid plans of mice and men, something always goes awry. And in this case, there were a couple of hiccups. All the numbers and the information in this guide served as a handy reminder to me, especially when tuning in the airflow meter. We had come across our first problem almost straight away. Our beautiful multi-branch stainless steel exhaust manifold was designed for left-hand drives, which meant the wastegate provision on the side was hitting our steering column. Luckily we test fitted it first, so we had to remove it, adjust the wastegate provision and refit it and retest with the turbo and the wastegate to make sure everything fitted properly. So it taught me one thing. Be sure that when importing parts from the States or any other country that's got left-hand drives, that those parts don't interfere with your fitment. After all final fitment checks were confirmed, it was time to torque down the head. I used ARP head studs, a Cometic multi-layered steel gasket and copper spray. And finally bolted it down. The wastegate and the exhaust manifold were pre-fitted, the turbocharger was installed, and we were ready to move on. Now for the turbo to drain its oil back to the sump, we had to make a provision on the side of the sump for the oil to drain back from the turbo. So a hole was drilled in the side of the sump. Unfortunately, the best position is through that cooling sink there, so that you miss the oil pump on the inside. We had a bulkhead fitting with a right angle join, which we connected to a braided hose and ran up to the bottom of the turbo. Due to the likely spike in oil temperature, an oil cooler was fitted. This came with an oil filter sandwich plate which fits between the engine block and the oil filter, which allowed me to service the vehicle as normal. It has two outlets which allow for the oil to run through the oil cooler and back again, which run through a thermostat so allow the vehicle to heat up in good time. Now with the car warming up quickly, we needed to ensure that it stayed cool or maintain the correct operating temperature. So two electric fans were fitted in addition to the viscous fan to work against the radiator, the intercooler and the oil cooler. I made up a simple bracket out of tubular piping and connected the intercooler and oil coolers all in situ. You'll see that there's not much space here to work with, and this picture tells it all. For the intercooler piping, I had to run the pipes behind the bumper and up through the body. This required cutting two holes in the actual body itself, slightly proud of the size of the pipe, and then putting rubber surrounding to stop any chafing. The pipes on the near side of the vehicle will run up through and to the airflow meter. Just before the airflow meter will be a coupler where the blow-off valve is situated. You'll see that on the top right of this photo. As for your airflow meter, you can adjust the fuel demand by turning the cog that you can see in this photo here, and you'll also need to install a chip or have it chip tuned. My build was centered around a chip designed by Ethos Motorsport, so I purchased one, opened up my ECU, slipped the old one out and popped the new one in. Now with the turbo in place, as you saw earlier, we needed to get the exhaust from the turbo married up to the existing exhaust system. I wasn't about to buy a brand new system without testing the vehicle for a while first, so a little adapter box was fabricated to join it all up. I purchased a silicone coolant hose set and fitted that round the vehicle too. The wiring looms were then set in place and many things were polished on the way to being put back, including the inlet manifold as you can see here. The injectors were swapped out for larger injectors with a bigger delivery, and they were put in place in the manifold before the manifold was installed. This little blue device is called a vacuum manifold. It allows me to take one vacuum supply off the inlet manifold and branch it off into many supplies. Various components in the setup need a vacuum signal to operate properly, like this boost controller that effectively allowed you to pinch the air that's going to the wastegate diaphragm and hold it down that bit longer. The rising rate fuel pressure regulator, which also requires a vacuum signal. And of course my blow-off valve, which I discussed earlier. As well as these things, the gauges inside the car that I'd put just behind the ashtray here. Other information my gauge would supply would be my oil pressure and my oil temperature. This would be taken from an adapter that would fit in the existing port on the oil pressure sensor, as well as at the top of my turbo. I also attached an oil catch can. This connected to the valve cover via a breather hose. The project was nearing completion. Everything had been double checked. The fluids had been put in, and a couple of aesthetic features added too. We were almost ready for our first start. Excuse the masking tape and the dust. I cannot thank you enough for taking the time out to watch my project. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please take a moment to like or subscribe.